Okay, I think we can get started here. So thank you all for attending our webinar from Figma to production with Blitzy. It's going to be about the Figma integration that we have with Blitzy, and I'm joined here today with Blitzy founding designer Aditya Karra, who spent 6 years at NVIDIA and is our lead designer and was really one driving this integration, as well as our senior AI solutions consultant Ben Bergerson. He has a background in system engineering and works with our enterprise and most strategic customers on a day-to-day basis to help execute projects and really drive engineering velocity. I'll be monitoring the chat for any questions you may have, so please feel free to send them my way, and we'll have Q&A during the back half of the webinar. So I'll kick it over to you, Ben, to get us started.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam, and good afternoon or good morning for everyone joining us around the world. I like to start us really grounding in what front-end design and front-end development means for our customers. And as Sam said, as questions come up, feel free to throw those in the chat. We'll make sure to address those in the second half of the call. But to start, right, front-end development is the first thing that every single enterprise customer is going to see when they interact with the business. And so getting it right is absolutely essential. It is not a preference. It is a requirement for every single enterprise. It's the first thing they see, the first thing they judge. And for many of the highly regulated industries, for financial services, for healthcare, the types of customers that we work with, if that trust is not there, that affects revenue. And so when we think about the implications of high quality design and high quality front end implementation, it is not just a preference. It is not just a creative piece. It is revenue generation. And so I will kind of kick it to Aditya to ground us in some common vocabulary that we're going to use throughout this session. And then we'll talk about how Blitzy is being used by our customers every single day, some of the largest companies in the world, to actually drive front end development in production, not just prototyping, but production ready front end development. So I will kick it to Aditya.
Thank you so much for that intro, Ben and Sam. So I want the designers on the call to bear with me for 30 seconds. I just want to talk about what a design system is. It's essentially the reason why your product looks and feels a certain way compared to another company's product. So in a more tactile sense, it's essentially reusable components, tokens, color spacing, typography, rules that enforce visual consistency across every screen, every product that your company has, right? It's a brand synergy essentially. And here's an example to drive that point home, right? We basically have three screens here. They're all identical. It's a homepage of a streaming service. But the simple fact that we've rebuilt these screens with different design systems, it's giving you a totally different feel. Even if you did not look at the details, you look at the first one and you know it's Netflix, right? So that's the power of a design system. And that's the insight that we want to start with, that enterprises care very, very deeply about how their products look. And this, in turn, is the reason why you cannot check in code that doesn't match your design system. If it doesn't pass that review, that standard, the bar that you've set for designs, and like the components that you have, it will not get merged into your front end code. It's great to explore with vibe coding tools, but that is the bottleneck. And here's another example, right? So we were creating this landing page. So we were featured on the Lex Friedman podcast, and then we were trying to convert this to code and everything, and we were playing around with some of the tools that were on the market. And the outcome that we have is on the right? So this is what I had in Figma on the left, and what I received from say a lovable is on the right. You can see how there is no fidelity between the assets and everything, and that's the reason I can't use this. It's great to visualize, it's great to prototype, it's great to explore, but it does not align with what I really want to check in to my code base, right? And that's exactly the bottleneck that Ben has described.
And so now to kind of ground us in the way in which enterprises are approaching front-end development, right, is we have a couple of different tools. And I want to start off by saying that these are fantastic tools for certain types of projects. And Blitzy is just solving a fundamentally different problem than these tools are solving. And so we have vibe coding tools, which is fantastic for folks who want to kind of with very, very little coding experience, be able to very quickly get prototypes. And, Aditya showed an example with the Lex Friedman podcast of being able to prototype very quickly, very easily, and in a really powerful way. These are a couple companies we have there, great companies. We love them, right? Figma plugins as well. It's a similar kind of world where they're built for kind of this first draft export, not necessarily large code base context. The component mapping, kind of high fidelity, full stack validation is just not the weight that those tools are necessarily designed to be used with. And then if we think about kind of agentic tools, right? Claude Code, and that is just one of many other kind of Copilot assistant tools with other MCP. It's fantastic for actually getting into the weeds and generating code, but what you're not building is at scale, right? You're building at a single screen. You are still working side by side. You have your IDE, you have your Figma screen, and you are toggling every piece until it is right. And the full code base context of how does that integrate with the back end? How do we have full functionality? How do we make sure that the responsiveness that we need when we turn this on to thousands, tens of thousands, millions of users for a lot of the companies we work with, that it's going to be able to actually work? And so what Blitzy does is it's going to be able to not only read those design files at the node level, which is a very specific thing to the design elements, but it's also going to do what everyone is already very familiar with Blitzy doing, which is complete code base context. And that is millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of lines of code within its context window. If that is new to folks here and they've never heard about infinite code context, then I encourage you to come and talk to us, because the way in which we unlock that with thousands of specialized agents is truly one of a kind. We're the only platform in the world, the only company in the world that is truly able to understand massive enterprise systems, and the impact that this has on front-end development is pretty massive. And so if we think about what that looks like, right, is it's the same platform, right? It's just the Figma capability and front-end capability is what might feel new to some folks here. And I will say we have customers that have been working with this implementation for quite a while now. So it's not very new to our customers, but maybe new to some folks on this. So Blitzy has the knowledge graph that continues to hold the entire project context. So it has not just the pure source code, but also architecture, design systems, requirements, any other code base context you have when it comes to Confluence or Jira or any of the other kind of documentation you have. Blitzy has that knowledge. And we devote hours, days upfront of continuous inference to get that understanding. Designs are just another input into that same engine, right? And so if we think about what does that really look like, how do we achieve production ready code? And that is how we define success. You could ask any one of our customers. We are not interested in counting the number of tokens or lines of code outputted. We are interested in how long it takes to take a project to production. Visual fidelity, right? The output matches the design. If that is not the case, you are not merging it into production. And so we are not considering that a success until the exact values are extracted, not approximated, and then translated into the actual design. Code quality. And so there's a couple words here that kind of speak to it. I will say the way in which we enable quality for our clients is a multi-hour discussion, and I could go on and on, but clean hierarchy, real imports, backend ready structure integrates into the existing code base, right? This is not a mock-up that lives in isolation. This is added on to a full stack development. And then it is validated so that we can check before we even deliver the code to our clients. And when I say we, it's our thousands of agents working autonomously to create automated testing, visual analysis, right? We are actually taking screenshots and looking at what we are building and comparing it to those screens over and over and over, hundreds and hundreds of times for hours or sometimes days before we deem enterprise grade. And all of that will be driven by you, the client, of what enterprise grade means. And then when it comes to the unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing, all of the pieces that you would determine is necessary before merging something into production, Blitzy is going to execute autonomously prior to delivery. So with that, I am now going to kick it back to Aditya to actually show us some examples. We've been doing a lot of talking kind of high level. Let's look at what this actually looks like.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. That was a great overview. And to ground that, I have a couple of examples highlighted that I want to share with you all. So let's go one by one. So this is the first one where we gave it a Figma input of this enterprise data table. So we just found this file which was well labeled, well placed in the Figma community. And you can see this is very typical of any enterprise dashboard or UI. You have filters up top, and it's just this one screen, right? That represents what the design is. And this was the prompt that we gave to the platform where we asked this to like render this entirely in front end with high fidelity and ensure that it captures screenshots of it at different viewpoints. And to be honest, we did not even give it like a lot of responsive breakpoint input or anything. And this is the input output we want to show you. So I've hosted some of these local ones on Vercel, and as you can see, this is what the platform gave us in one shot. And it baked in some interactions extrapolated from the screen itself that okay, seems like an accordion that expands or collapses. It made the filters working, which was very interesting. And more than anything, it did something we did not ask it to do, which was extrapolating responsive behavior. So you as a designer, when we are handing off designs to the front end engineering team, we typically hand off design views at different breakpoints. But even if you give it like one breakpoint, the platform right now is capable enough of extrapolating the design details it needs for other breakpoints, right? And if you but explicitly go out of your way to specify, then obviously it respects and follows that as well. So I want to resize this and show you what that looks like, because some of this behavior is best looked at when it's responsive, right? So it has the intelligence to wrap this around into like uh, the entire row and column becomes a card, and it's able to build this UI out. So that is pretty interesting as well to see. So that's just one of the experiments. Let's go back to our Figma file. And you could see, right, there was visual fidelity, the table expand collapse interaction was there, and the responsive behavior was extrapolated. So now this is one of my favorites because this is how we've been lately doing a lot of feature development. So the context is we onboarded Blitzy's own front-end UI repo. So I want to demonstrate that you can add features to an existing code base. And that's, I think, very powerful for teams that are developing new features all the time, which is all the teams in the world. So I'm going to the platform here, and this is the settings page, right? So it's like right out of our live um, UI. So I onboarded this code base. And then on via Figma, I gave it another sixth integration card that I wanted to add, and I gave it a feature flow. So I did not give it one screen, but I gave it multiple screens representing a flow. So the expectation was all of this is Figma. User comes here, clicks on this particular card to connect. They see an option to connect via app integration or PAT. Once they click open this dialog. So these are all real Figma screens, as you can see, right? And this is overlapped with the existing code base. And so I want to show you what the platform gave it. So the platform was able to understand that these screens are sequential. And it was also able to find out the perfect integration point uh, in the integrations page, even though I've not represented the other cards here, which was in the live code base, right? So let me show you the video output of that. Let me just crunch this so that we can see a better video. And there you go. So you see that it has added the sixth card, Doge SCM, and this is on the live code base, right? And I was able to run this locally, see all the checkboxes. It extrapolated some additional behavior like on blur for password fields and everything. And yeah, you were able to literally implement flows of a functionality. It's as so if you see it from a philosophical perspective, Figma is just another way of or a prompt, right? It's like an aspirational state of the system that you're trying to communicate, and the platform goes and meets it there. So moving on to another interesting demo. So a lot of teams that we talk to not always have Figma screens or anything, right? They sometimes like just want to build something out, and they have a rough idea of how they want their design system to be. And they might even be referencing a publicly available design system. And mind you, there are so many, right? Like we have a resource internally where we identify all the publicly listed component libraries, and you have one from almost all the big tech companies, and like some are language specific and whatnot. So a lot of our customers tend to look at these and specifically pick out one to able to like control the visual aspects of their code gen. So for in this example, we again took Blitzy's own front-end UI repo. So I want to show you the settings page. This is what a settings page currently looks like. You have all these different tabs, and you can tell that we are following a certain design system, right? All of our components and the visual brand hierarchy, everything is aligned to what Blitzy has. But what we said was, okay, we don't have Figma input. We just have code base. What if I were to reskin it based on some other design system? So we did not give it any Figma input at all. We just asked the platform to reskin the entire UI of the settings page using SAP's Fiori design library. And this is a very popular enterprise library, and I'm sure we're all familiar with these tools. But you can tell that their visual aesthetic for buttons, components, elements is extremely, I mean, it's pretty different, right? And that's why it's their design system and not ours. So the ask for the system was that you have the settings page, we've onboarded the code base. Can you just install that? And we did not even have to reference the components one by one. We just named the npm. The system was able to do a 1:1 map between the elements that it detected in our code base and the elements that are there existing in the SAP design library. And this is the outcome. Let me show you the video for that. Again, these are not hosted because these are on the live code base that we have, but the other examples are on Vercel. So I would make sure that we can share the deck with you and you can click around and see the behavior for yourself. But now you see it's very different from the settings page I showed you. It even followed the theme that SAP Fiori UI follows, right? The radius and everything is different. The font is different. So you can see that it has made the changes, especially if you go to the Teams tab. It's extremely different from the kind of elements that we had. It just followed all the radius, color, design token, spacing from the SAP UI's library. So that is a very interesting input for all of us. And even if you look at this one, right, particularly the toggle system, if I go back to our UI, the toggles look like this, and it just follows a different visual pattern altogether. And this is what it did. So just an example that you'd always do not need Figma to use Blitzy's front end capabilities. You can be very creative with the entry points there. And now I want to show you a complicated one that we did. So like in the first example, I told you if you do not give it multiple screens, it extrapolates responsive behavior. But if you do provide it screens, it is actually able to read the responsive logic between different breakpoints. So I gave it this complicated environments form page. It has a lot of fields, as you can see. And the interesting aspect is till a certain resolution, the newly formed environments are on the side. But the moment the screen responsiveness or the screen width reduces, the sidebar transforms into a drop down. So there is also some inherent uh, component logic that changes in the layout with the screen size reducing, right? And we just asked it to go ahead and build out this form and follow all the breakpoints that we've shared with it and everything. And this one is a clickable Vercel demo. So this is what Blitzy made in one shot, right? You can see all the assets are all here and clear. And you can scroll down. It actually added all the fields that we wanted it to. And now for the actual test, which is responsive behavior, if you resize this window, it was actually able to read just from the Figma files that this component was changing. And you can now see that the sidebar will become a dropdown. And you can actually select and see how it works, right? So this kind of inherent logic, it is able to read. It can follow a sequence of screens and stitch them together, stitch the context together and see what is right. And it would not be nice to say that we only tried our platform, because we also started experimenting with Cloud Code and Figma MCP and all. And I want to show you like three areas where Blitzy really shines, right? So let me show you Cloud Code's output for this as well, right? And just a second. This is also hosted on Vercel. So in one go, yes, it really got the layout pretty accurate. But once you start seeing it closer, and you will notice some of these problems also, right? It hallucinated a lot of the assets, right? Like when we gave, if you look at the original screens, let's compare it with the original UI, right? So you have the app bar and it has the icon there. It did not get that icon right. If you look at the settings, this icon system is not what was specified in the original Figma design itself, right? The settings icon and the help icon are extremely different. So one thing we've realized is assets is something that current tools were not able to handle well, and that's the reason why we went ahead and we started like working on this capability on our own, right? Because context apparently is the one-stop solution for almost everything, right? So if you see Blitzy's outcome, you were able to see all the assets and the fidelity was maintained there. The second thing was obviously the responsive behavior. If I resize this outcome, you will see that it does basic responsiveness, and I gave it all the same 5 screens, 6 screens that I also shared with our platform, right? And after a certain point, you will just start seeing the elements break, right? Like you've seen now that the text is gone outside the bounding box, the icons and all are not rendering fairly well. The variable secret section, it's kind of broken. So that's another thing. So I think with this, we were very clear that if you want to give multiple screens as input, then the platform really does a great job at it, right? At handling that. And now for just a final demo before I hand back to Ben, is this is a fun one. I wanted to see like all of the modern UIs are very minimalist in nature. But if you go back to the 90s, we had a lot of skeuomorphic UI, right? UIs that had a lot of texture, gradient, shadow, layout, and all of those things. So I literally found somebody who made a Winamp. I don't know if 90s kids, people who had a computer in the 90s will know this, but you see the detail here, right? Like it has a lot of details which are not akin to the UIs we are familiar with today. But if we're able to develop, like if the visual fidelity is truly a hallmark, we should be able to match this. And I am proud to say that the platform actually did. So if you go to the outcome, this is exactly what Blitzy made. And let me zoom in to show you that it actually baked in a few of the hover states for these elements. The shuffle button actually clicks and holds a state, which is interesting. But yeah, all of this UI, the shadows, everything was translated 1:1 from the input that we gave it. So yeah, I think those were some of the experiments that I wanted to talk about. Like they serve as varying proofs of different attributes that the platform is capable of. So coming back, and also before I move into some of the best practices, I want to talk about the agent action plan. I think this is a very important detail. So as of today, as you're all familiar, that agent action plan is the source of truth, the spec that is driving the Blitzy development, right? Because we're an autonomous asynchronous platform. You set it and you forget it. So before you set it, this is part of the setting up process where the system plays back its understanding of your requirement and intent and works off of there. So what we've explicitly gone forward with is we've added a design specific section to the agent action plan. And so even before you start the code gen, you have the confidence that the platform has read and seen your design. So I wanted to show you an example of this in a project. So as you can see, I'm just waiting for this to load. If I go to the build prompt, this I had given it a simple Figma screen, a dashboard, right? And I asked it to convert this into front-end code or whatever. And if I go to the agent action plan, there's a dedicated Figma design analysis section where it talks about the elements it has detected. So it was able to tell what's a side menu, what's a header, everything, and create a token manifest. So it listed out all the colors that were in the file and how often they were used, the spacing, the typography, basically everything that you need for visual fidelity, right? So this is kind of a pre-assurance to the front-end engineers and the designers to understand exactly what's going to happen, right? That the platform is able to see all these details. So we'll go and execute on it. So with that, I want to move to a few quick best practices. And again, there are so many, so I will just skim over these. We've always seen like the customers on the customer's end also that the quality of their input has always determined output. So we have a ton of documentation, but in broad strokes, all of the definition that you do in your Figma file directly translates to front end, right? So for example, auto layout directly maps to CSS flexbox, even the directions that you set in your auto layout. Or when you name your layers meaningfully, it translates into like semantic relationships. So just leaving box as blank versus app bar container, it has a gain that you will see in the code base, right? When it comes to attachments, as of today, there is no upper limit to how many frames or screens you've attached. We've even done some runs with our customers where we've attached the entire component library and it was able to parse through all the pages and pick out all the components. But the cap or the nuance to that is all of the frames need to be grouped by affinity. So if there is simple logic, either a sequence or a state change or similarity between these components, if you group them together, rest assured that the platform is smart enough to understand and parse all that information in. So in general, if I were to summarize this slide in a single line, I would say that you just have to be mindful of the signal you're giving to the system, because now your file is being read by a machine that's very powerful and it doesn't miss anything. So it's like you don't want to overwhelm it with all the signals that you give it. So if you're selective about how you share what you share, you actually see very, very good outcomes. And on top of this, uh, when it comes to prompting, I had already shown in my demo as well that you can reference any public design system by just using an @, right? So going back to the file I was sharing initially, you just need to mention the package name, and the platform is smart enough to actually download it, use it, map the components one on one, flag the ones that are not there. So that is a very, very good capability. And finally, since the system recursively validates the UI, so what it essentially does is literally after it's created a version of it, logs in, takes screenshots, compares it with Figma, reads the entire node tree, does all the math again and again recursively to ensure that everything is pixel perfect. So I think configuration when you're setting up your environment in the Blitzy platform becomes very important so that the platform has the right access to be able to go and work with these things. Um, Moving on, in summary, I want to talk about like you've seen that the platform is pretty versatile. It can accept like 3 different kinds of input. So you have Figma, you have the component library slash design system, you have the existing code base, and you can have a combination of all of these, right? But you can be very, very creative based on what you have and what you don't have. We've seen people who don't have any Figma on their team, they just reference a public library. If some people have a component library that lives in Figma, they just simply attach it. Some people have it living in a code in storybooks, then you can just onboard it with your code base. And if you don't have an existing code base, you can just start a greenfield build, right? But the goal of this matrix is to show that you're not bound by a particular tool or a scenario. The platform is versatile enough to work with all of these capabilities. I think I've drilled down a lot into detail, so I would want to kick it back to Ben to actually talk about what we're seeing on the field, and that's pretty interesting.
I think one important point also to add, Aditya, is that when you think about how to execute these sorts of projects with other tools, Blitzy's main differentiator is that it is going to be done autonomously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, there are many ways to achieve a high fidelity front end output, right? Starting with manually writing every single line of code to kind of the other end of the spectrum where Blitzy sits, which is completely autonomous. And so all of the examples that Aditya showed, the reason why it's so powerful is not just that it was a production ready output, right? Because there are many different paths to getting to production ready. It's that Blitzy got there in a single autonomous path through the system. And like from a pure technology perspective, right? Like I'm an engineer, I get excited about technology. From a pure technology perspective, that is something that no other platform in the world can say. It's incredibly exciting. And then the impact that it actually has on our customers from a business perspective, as well as kind of how these folks are spending their time is really different and exciting. So starting with designers like Aditya, right? I think that nothing brings them as much joy as seeing their great designs in production as quickly as possible, right? And so being able to minimize the handoff cycles and actually move things into production quickly is obviously very exciting to designers. When thinking about front end engineers, I think this is really the most interesting shift, right? Where rather than iteratively building kind of hands-on keyboards with their IDE next to the screens and working through it like that, they are getting code from Blitzy that is ready to be moved into production. And now their job is to review that on the back end. And on the front side, rather than being a front-end developer, they're acting more as a front-end architect where they are working on higher order engineering problems, making architectural decisions and kind of thinking through edge cases, optimization, and putting that all in the prompt up front, right? Because to remind us of the process that Blitzy goes through, it starts with ingesting your code base, understanding your code base, regardless of scale. The way in which we do that is a bit of the Blitzy magic, but to go one level deeper, right? It's thousands of agents that are working together to map out a complete kind of relational understanding and build a knowledge graph of that code base. Then once we have that understanding, it is prompting the system. It's the front end engineers, the designers working together actually on these prompts, and then getting that agent action plan that Aditya showed us, the spec that dictates exactly what Blitzy is going to do before it does it. And so you get a peek under the hood before a single line of code is written, and you see what's going to be done. You can validate that Blitzy understands the designs. It understands your intent as well. It understands that the integration with the back end and these integration tests need to be passing before Blitzy should consider this a success, right? All of those pieces are mapped out in that agent action plan, and then it's delivered, right? And so if we think then maybe one level higher, what does this mean for the leadership? If you're able to massively accelerate the most important thing that a customer interacts with, right? It means that the revenue generation from front-end development, from designs, is able to be significantly accelerated. And so there's a lot more thought going into the roadmap, rather than the roadmap sitting there and the engineers being that bottleneck. The engineering team is now enabled to work faster. The product folks, the design folks are now enabled to work faster. And so there's actually pressure on the leadership on the roadmap side of what are the more exciting features, designs we can be building, providing more value to our customers to drive revenue. And how do we do that across the code base consistently, right? Inconsistency is a challenge that every single enterprise faces when you have many developers working with their own understanding of the code base, their own definition of done. And when Blitzy is able to manage that context, then a consistent output, not just from a front end perspective, but a coding standard perspective, right? The style guides that it's going to be following is going to be consistent. And so that is really where, not necessarily overnight, right? That change management takes some time, but that is where our customers are really seeing the biggest value, is changing that bottleneck. And so just to kind of close out before we start touching on some questions, right? Blitzy is not writing code. We are developing software. The difference is it is full stack, it is enterprise scale, and it is production ready. And that is not going to be after you wrestle with the tool over and over in your IDE or terminal for hours or hours. It is front loading the work to define what success looks like. And then Blitzy is going to build that autonomously and deliver back in the form of a pull request software that is worth merging. So with that, we will now open it up, take a couple of questions. And if we can't get to all the questions today, we will definitely be able to follow up. We'll add some contact info and look forward to kind of connecting with you all in conversation in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. That was great. So we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A and in the chat. So these are going to be this first one's kind of multi-pronged, but I'll go with the first one, the first part of it first. So someone asked, at some point, can you please explain how Blitzy processes the data model, which a code base works on? And then kind of tied to that, what is relational understanding? Does that refer to the database? So I was wondering, Ben, if you could touch a bit more on the infinite code context that you talked about and how Blitzy really understands your code base.
Sure, that's a super important question, right? When we are thinking about what high quality looks like, and we are saying that is built on a fundamental understanding, there are naturally questions, right? How do we develop that fundamental understanding? I will say, first, what we are working with is typically application source code at its core, at a bare minimum. And then on top of that, to build out those integration tests, run those integration tests, those end-to-end tests, usually we're working with kind of mock DB synthetic data. Many of the highly regulated industries, for obvious reasons, are not working with live databases. But I think that what the question's getting at is how are we able to run this full suite of tests to validate what we are building? And it is going to be with a heavier implementation, oftentimes deployed within our client's environment in their VPC to be able to actually execute what we're building and test. And then I'll also say from a code perspective, from kind of an application layer perspective, at that ingestion, right, we initially connect to the code base. Blitzy deploys thousands of specialized agents. So it is across Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT. We are using them in different ways. The agents have the ability to dynamically recruit additional agents, and they are working their way through the entire code base in your environment. From a security standpoint, we work with incredibly highly regulated industries. And so it is in your environment is the only way we want to operate. And we are building that relational understanding and building out that hybrid vector graph database, then using that in a RAG implementation at CodeGen so that we are building an understanding and then querying that understanding at execution time. And the orchestration of that is the brainchild of Sid Pardeshi, our CTO, decade of experience at NVIDIA. And he is kind of the genius behind our ability to have that infinite context and then translate that into production ready code. That was the long-winded answer. That's a really important question.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I think also kind of tying back to that, you touched on validation a bit, but when all these different enterprises have their own validation techniques and what they think of as enterprise grade code, someone was wondering about how does Blitzy validate this with a specific enterprise? Does Blitzy just have a basis for what an enterprise validation system is, or does it take people's own validation technique in? I was wondering if you could touch on that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So first, at ingestion, right, Blitzy will be able to see the test suites that you're running, right, and be able to build that understanding, not just kind of unit testing that we have across the code base, but kind of those runtime tests as well. If those don't exist, Blitzy can help build them. We highly recommend building them. But essentially, when you are thinking about this shift from iterative kind of human in the loop development to batch automation, it's important to set up the guardrails to have Blitzy validate in the way that your enterprise validates. And so for many of my customers, right, that is not just that code compiles and has unit testing, because there's a lot more to production ready than that. And so it is setting up that full suite of runtime testing, right? It's running regression tests maybe for a modernization that you're doing, right? I think a little less relevant to a Figma discussion, but modernization is a huge kind of use case for us. And we need to make sure that there's functional parity. And so being able to autonomously validate that is essential, right? Running security scans, linting, all of the other things that your team is going to do before merging it into production. We are going to build into we call it kind of the environment setup so that Blitzy can autonomously execute that. And that is not a trivial discussion. Usually that's a number of discussions with your solutions consultant like myself to make sure that we are setting that up properly. But the impact is obviously dramatic, right? We can have production ready code at the output.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Another question, this is kind of from two different people, but creating a project with a Figma design, what is the iterative process after you create it and you kind of need to align on something else? And then also, what is the typical end-to-end process once people get familiar with the platform? So kind of two parts again. I'll throw this one to Aditya because, as other people may not know, Aditya has run over 150 experiments on the Blitzy platform with different Figma designs. So I think you're best suited for this one there, Aditya.
Sure, thanks, Sam. So essentially, what we've seen is Blitzy is able to do 80 to 90% of the work. So you might start by exploring, however, whatever your design process is. And once you have your Figma designs ready, like as ready as a handoff to a front-end engineer, that is when you feed it into the system. It's pretty straightforward. I can just show you what that process looks like. In fact, it'll be very easy. But essentially, what's happening here is you are literally just giving it the Figma frame URL, and that's the process. So let's say I want to add a feature. This is also something that we're familiar with. And this is the build prompt. So you see this Figma icon. I can just come in here and paste all my Figma frame URLs and then add context around it, and it just works. Now, what this does is Blitzy, because it's autonomous and you've set it and you've given it the entire Figma file, it will do 80 to 90% of everything, right? Right. There might be some things like API keys or things that you might want to still add that the platform obviously cannot know unless you've added them already in the environments and secret side. But in general, you would see the bulk of work done. Now, if you want to make changes to it, there are two ways, right? You always want to scope, is this a change big enough that changes the original scope of the project that you had defined? If not, then you have an option to do a refine PR. You essentially let the platform know what are the changes you want, and you can just, the platform will only touch those parts that require a change that have a delta and recursively run on that. If not, if you have even smaller changes than that, like just a few things here, like typography, or you just want to move a few padding, margin, spacing here and there, then I personally use Claude in the very last end, right? Because I have the local running on one side, I want to see it and change it. So if I were to break it down, 80-85% changes happen in the first run of Blitzy itself. Then the last, like the another 10% happens if you want to do a refine PR, you can just bulk and just change everything up. And the last 5% of changes, you can use Cloud Code or any other IDE tool of your choice. So that's been my workflow lately for all the features I've been shipping.
Awesome. Thank you. And then kind of we got to follow up to the second part of that question. How much does it take in time to go from 0 to 100? I would imagine it might vary a bit, but I don't know if either of you guys want to take this one.
So it's like all the time that you invest in setting up the Figma file, right? That gets paid back because you don't have to do audit reviews. Because typically, let's forget that the platform exists, right? I hand off the design, the engineering team will take a week or something to do that job and then come back, and then I will run it and audit it pixel by pixel, making sure that it's matching my Figma. It's a weeks long process that I'm talking about, especially if it's a large piece of UI or a lot of features, right? But now what we do is I hand off the Figma frames to the platform, and it generates a PR typically like overnight if it has to. And once it's done that, I hand off the PR as well as the Figma like frames both to the engineering team, so that the front end engineers can now they become reviewers, right? Like Ben said, it's elevating the engineers from like the groundwork to architectural work. So they can take a look at the entire thing and bless the code side of things. But you as a designer literally get something back to play with and like try out on your own end within like 1.5 2 days. We've seen like weeks long timelines crunched into like 2 3 4 days max.
And
So yeah, and also it depends on the size of the feature. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
just to add to that as well, right? Like, so the short answer is overnight, right? Is usually how long it takes. So it'll be running for about 8 hours autonomously. And to put that into perspective, just in terms of the agentic space, right? Is tool like Claude Code, and I'm personally a big Anthropic fan. I love what they do, right? Anthropic will run for Claude Code will maybe run for about 30 minutes before you kind of need human interaction to course correct and send it on its way. I think we're seeing similar things from other really great tools like Devon, Cognition, Cursor, Codex, right? We're kind of talking in the range of minutes to maybe getting close to an hour. We see kind of really cool examples of getting Claude Code to run for many hours. But I would say that the day-to-day engineering work that probably you all are familiar with is closer to the range of minutes. And so the fact that Blitzy is able to run overnight, 8 hours continuously, and it's not going off the rails, it is following your direction and coming back with a meaningful output, is incredible, right? Like, that is incredible. And so the workflow we usually see, as Aditya said, is front loading the requirements, having Blitzy execute overnight, and then any additional refinements that might need to be executed, you are doing that either with the platform. We can do a refined PR and make smaller adjustments, or you're picking it up, pulling it into your IDE, and maybe making those edits with Claude Code, right? Like, that's what Claude Code is great at, is smaller iterative adjustments. And so we don't see Blitzy as like the only tool in the enterprise tool set. It is one of the many tools, and we are the tool that is focused on executing at scale, not just one frame, but dozens, hundreds. I'm sure Aditya has many on his on his machines that he would love to start shipping. And so that's really where we focus at scale.
Yeah, and two things to add to that, right? Just want to underline, like, there's a finer behavioral change when you start using autonomous tools, which is very interesting. Like, I literally have been setting up projects on Friday evenings to come back to see the outcome on Monday. Like, because when you are in sync, when you are literally a co-programmer with these tools, you have to sit with them. So when you are giving it 6 hours, yes, it's supposed to be 12 hours, that is now crunched to 6 hours, but you're still giving it 6 hours. But set it and forget it is very liberating in its own way. And two, you can parallelize. The biggest strength of something that's autonomous is that now you can set up multiple jobs and then come back and review them in waves, right? So it does have a very big change on how you're able to get that much throughput and with what kind of input. So that's very interesting also to note in a day-to-day experience.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So I know we're kind of coming up on time, and I think that's really a great place to end our discussion here today. I just want to make note of if anyone has any additional questions, I know that we didn't get to all of them. Please feel free to check out our website, both on some of our open source examples for the projects that we run and kind of what our use cases are, as well as feel free to talk to an expert. I will be putting Ben's email in the chat as well right now. So with that, that's the end of our webinar. Thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Aditya. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.